All right, so hello everyone. My name is Sean Beal. I'm the Vice President of Community and Technical College Student Affairs at the Washington Student Association, and I'm also the Director of Legislative Affairs at the University of Washington, Seattle. First of all, thank you so much for coming to our panel tonight. We got some very incredible panelists lined up for you today, and we're really excited to talk about, student power, what it used to look like, what it looks like now, and where we're headed. So just to be very clear, this call is being recorded so that we can use it in future marketing purposes, and if you are okay with that, please say. If you're not, feel free to turn off your camera. But later on, I believe we will be taking a photo just of the panel and of the event. So we'd actually like to include folks and ask folks now to please come on camera so that we can get that facilitated, so the panelists can engage with you and all that good stuff. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. I'll go ahead and start with Caesar and just give a brief introduction. Who you are, what you're doing, and what you used to do for your statewide and for the USSA.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm State Representative Cesar Aguilar from Central West Phoenix, little part of Glendale. I was a former executive director for the Arizona Students Association and former board member for the Rocky Mountain region for USSA. It's a good time.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off to NECA.
Hey everyone, it's good to be with you. My name is Neka Akubeze. I'm based in Houston, Texas, but I spent a very large part of my life in Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, where I was the executive director of United Council of UW Students, which was our statewide student association at the time. And I am currently a global community organizer, community activist, and also a leadership coach, as well as an attorney. I do criminal defense work and immigration work. So my plate's often full, but I'm excited to be here with y'all.
Great. Thank you so much. We're excited to have you. Matt, if you'd like to take it next.
Yeah, hey folks. My name is Matt Cordero. I'm based out of here in Brooklyn, and currently I work for the Working Families Party, where I'm a political strategist working on a lot of our national independent expenditure work. But I come through this by being a former USSA board member, and I helped start a statewide student association in my home state of New Jersey.
Thank you so much, Matt. And then we're going to end it off with Victor.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here with you, share some good space with y'all. I am the current executive director of the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy Lane here based in LA. I am coming to this conversation by way of UC Santa Cruz, where I spent a good amount of my undergraduate time there and was the University of California Student Association president. And then after undergrad, went and helped run USSA as vice president and president back in 2000 to 2012. Woof. So that feels like a long time.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I'm going to take us to our first, sort of round robin question that each of you are going to answer. And we're going to go in reverse order. So we're going to start with Victor here. So to start, could each of you talk about the issues that you organized around as student activists and what motivated you to take on leadership roles in either your SSA or the United States Student Association?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. I mean, I think to start off, I think for me was around access and affordability, and primarily in California, it was undocumented students' ability to access financial aid in state tuition in particular, but also just in state financial aid for them to attend the university. I was coming to school just kind of knowing, like, if you did everything right and you met your prerequisites and you were at the institution, at a public institution, there's no reason why you could not be able to stay, and money just felt like a ridiculous excuse for you not to be able to stay in school. And so the California Dream Act was one of the big campaigns that I got involved in, and that was tied to the Federal Dream Act, which USSA was running, which really kind of was the gateway to a lot of other issues around the Higher Education Act reauthorization, Pell Grants, student debt. And then I think most notably for me, I was at undergrad during a time where fee increases were going up exponentially. I mean, we had a couple of years with 30+% increases in our fees. And so that spurred a ton of activism at the UC system across the entire system. And so, that's kind of what forged my experience was getting involved during that time. just how unaffordable college was getting for a lot of folks. But yeah, that's essentially what allowed me to get involved and grow in my leadership and connect with a lot of amazing folks. And it was a pleasure to share space with a lot of folks that are on this call. So that was my path into organizing.
Thank you. And that's a pretty consistent path that we're seeing across the country right now, especially in Washington. Undocumented students were organizing last session. They're continuing to organize as well to try to get, paid opportunities in higher education, something that they're going to be working on a lot. But group at my campus is really steadfast about that. So it's nice to hear that we're continuing to work on issues related to that. So I'm going to go to Matt next.
Yeah. So, I got kind of lucky that I was able to kind of fall in with some of the campus radicals when I was a freshman. And we really wanted to do a lot to make the campus more democratic. And we wanted to do that because if we had a more democratic campus, we could do things like help control the costs and help make sure that, students were protected and got the services that that they needed. Just like I'm sure now, like the cost of an education was like skyrocketing every year. The student loan situation was very bad. So much like I'm sure lots of folks, those were a lot of our reasons to get in to sort of get like involved. But we also wanted ways to actually win the campaigns. Like we wanted ways to lower tuition. So that sort of led us to wanting to like take over student government. And then as we sort of like started to be successful in our organizing on campus, we were able to connect with other groups from around the country and just, I learned a lot from a lot of the people on this call about what was sort of possible. And then it worked. And then we were able to win, like, at least at the time, the like lowest tuition increase in like 20 years. So it was like, it's interesting to think about now how we kind of came about full circle. But yeah, I mean, the costs were too high, students weren't being treated right. And we thought, trying to build a more democratic campus culture by building student power was the way to fix it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think that's a really big part of the reason why we're here is to make our institutions more, affordable and inclusive. And affordability, was an issue 20 years ago and it's an issue now, today. So we just got to keep organizing around that. And it should not be this difficult to get an education. It really should. So that's something that we're gonna have to keep organizing around. I'm gonna go to NECA next. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I got my start in student organizing probably before college. Like I was the young rabble rouser with a bullhorn as a sophomore in high school. So I just thought that's how you win things. You got to lift your voice and learned that mostly from my parents. But I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is fairly diverse compared to the rest of the state. And I also grew up in a Black community. So raising my voice was mostly like, I can't believe they would do that. And then all my people would be like, that's right. And then I got to UW-Madison. At the time, it was like 40,000 students, 900 Black students. And I would be like, this is outrageous. And everybody would be like, so? And I was like, oh, wait, where's my community? So that's how I got attached to student organizing. When I was like, oh, I don't have my people here. I'm far away from home. I'm far away from the resources I would have leaned on. And I wouldn't say it was all like expertise. It still isn't, but it was definitely more, passion than art. But yeah, it was about like stumbling through because you knew you had to do something different. So most of the issues that I worked on the early end of my student organizing was around student of color issues on campus, whether it was like curriculum, access, affordability, services, programs, things like that. And it later evolved to a more statewide like policy platforms that we wanted to take on. And then eventually got caught up with the USSA crew when we started to look at what like federal like, well, how could we do something on a national scale that would actually, we would feel it, on the statewide level. So that's really where my trajectory kind of turned is I was looking for, I was looking for my people. I hope I found some of them even on this call tonight. I'm looking forward to chatting more with y'all. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is really for me at least, it was very interesting how quick that was. I got involved in student government my first year in college, and then I ran for student body president at my 2-year school. And then now I wear 15 different hats, and it's hard to keep track of exams, but we are working on it. But yeah, no, this work is intoxicating. And, finding folks that are similar minded and passionate about this work has been, I think, the community has been the best part of it. So many hats, 100%. But thank you so much for that. Caesar, we'll end it off with you here.
Yeah, so I got into like movement work because when I was in high school, so Arizona is very extreme. We've had lawmakers like Joe Arpaio, Russell Pierce, a lot of mass deportation and a lot of discrimination in the state. And so when I was in high school, immigration had showed up to my house to come and deport one of my parents. And so early on, I started getting involved in campaign work. But then when I got to college, I was actually studying to be a history teacher, and I got in contact with who at the time was the regional director for ASA, and she was registering people to vote. And I was like, well, how do I get involved in this stuff? And after that, basically sucked me into everything. When I was a intern at that time, we did a lot of work around student debt, and I remember jumping on calls to with USSA and President Obama and Secretary of Education Artie Duncan on reforming student loans. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever, that this organization actually had access to power, and there was reform happening at a national level. And so that got me super sucked into USSA and organizing with ASA. And some of the campaigns that we worked on were in-state tuition for undocumented folks. And just 2 years ago, we finally passed that. But it's crazy because the work you're doing 10 years from now will end up showing up 10 years. Well, and sometimes that's how long it takes. And those are some of the things as I got older, I started to realize you just got to be patient. But there's a lot of work that takes place, and when you feel the pain, it definitely hurts. But eventually, everybody keeps fighting, and I think you get to a positive place in the future. But I also got involved with SLAP, the Student Labor Action Project, helped organize. I was a cook on campus for Sodexo, and we were organizing some of the workers to try to unionize. It didn't go exactly as planned, and I needed to graduate, so kind of had to leave the movement in order to graduate on time. But I think those are some of it's the work that happens when you're a college student. It makes movement work very difficult when you also have to get your school done, you have to survive. So I know exactly how it feels to wear many hats. But I got a lot of good lessons from USSA and ASA. I was able to create a United Diversity Council at my university, and so we had all the Black and Brown and Asian people of color fraternities, and then we had like the Black Student Union, MECHA, and all these clubs, and it became very powerful. We were able to move a lot of legislation through student government, and we were able to move a lot of things forward that our community cared about, and we learned that collectively we had more power, and so those were some really good skills that I was able to get from ASA and USSA. And I just always kept organizing, and so those were some of the things I was able to do. And just like everybody else, our tuition, Arizona had one of the highest increase in tuition, highest divestments from the state legislature. And even now, as I'm in the state legislature, we continue to defund higher ed, and continue to be last in funding per student at the universities. And so USSA definitely helped me with being able to organize and fight those battles.
Thank you for that, and thank you all of you. It sounds like just not only are the issues that you all worked on, like we made progress, but there's still so much progress to keep going, to keep doing, to organize on these issues. And also, it sounds it from what I got is how accessible this work was for you at the time, and how maybe, I wouldn't say it's overlooked for current student leaders now, but I think something we can focus on is, like, we hit the 5% that are super passionate, but we got to work on, going out to folks, meeting them where they are instead of expecting them to come to us is going to be a really big thing to, make sure that we can build a national student movement going forward. But thank you all. That was great. So our first singular question is going to be for Victor. And you served as a president of both a statewide and a national student organization. What did you learn as a young leader, and how has that shaped your understanding of power today? Additionally, why did both organizations need to exist, and what were the key differences between them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the idea of power is one that, and what I learned about power, I think as a student going through a grassroots organizing weekend training that was provided by USSA, has just been super fundamental, I think, throughout my career. And I carry that today. I feel like I have a power analysis etched into my brain with any campaign related question that I have is just like, where does the power lie, and how are we aligning our strategies to make sure that we're changing the balance of power to get the outcome that we're seeking. And so I think for me, like, being a student leader and having the infrastructure that existed with the statewide student association, but also with USSA and the campaigns that both entities were running. I mean, that's how you build leadership, is through those experiences. And so there was a wealth of opportunity, I think, for me to get involved when I was on campus, and to own parts of the work, which, a lot of times, like, those experiences don't come that early on for folks. And so my understanding of, how to organize, what does a power analysis do, how does it function, why you need to build statewide power, why you need to be connected nationally with other folks that are doing it. A lot of the work that we were doing required building partnerships across campuses. So I was at the UC system, and so I think to address the question, I think more spot on. Like, the organizations existed because it's what was required in terms of being able to effectuate the change that we wanted to see. Statewide crises need statewide infrastructure. Federal crises need federal infrastructure. And if you don't have infrastructure and capacity built, you're not going to be able to move the ball in the way that you need to. For us, at its height, I think we were busing students to Regents meetings and showing up 3,000 plus strong, like shutting down meetings and, exercising our power in that way. Because it was important to shifting the narrative and the conversation around fee increases. I remember once we showed up to Sacramento the day a new speaker was going to be sworn in, and we got a meeting with the speaker that day, and ended up leading towards an increase in California financial aid, and the creation of the middle class family financial aid program that was created there with John Perez. And so, I think being a part of the statewide student association was important to deal with the system-wide issues that we were dealing with in California. And it also allowed us to partner with the other systems, the California Community Colleges, the California State University Association. And so together, the three systems were able to advocate to the state more effectively. And because we had students activated up and down the state, focused on Sacramento and what that lever of change needed. And then on the national front, I mean, it was bar none. It was connecting with, folks like NECA and Matt and Caesar, right, to like be able to advocate on federal issues like the DREAM Act and change the conversation on campuses around why it was important to have that, or even the conversation around student debt. And so I think for me, fundamentally, like, I walked away with the importance of infrastructure and how important infrastructure is and capacity is over the long run. As a student, your time is short on campus. You're there, you're involved maybe 1 year. You've got 2 good years before you're already on the way out. And so, you got to be thinking about leadership development as you get in. But if there's no infrastructure for new students to be plugged into, then the momentum leaves once you as a leader leave. And I think ultimately that's what happened with USSA, is just, not having the infrastructure be as strong as what was needed to continue feeding, right, the movement work that was needed to be fed, I think, in that instance. And so for me, I walked away now thinking back and reflecting back on how important it was to maintain the infrastructure, have campaigns that were active, constantly be active and constantly be building partnerships across campuses and across different states on multiple issues. Because ultimately that's how you built the power that was needed to address the challenges that we were facing, but also how you built the leadership infrastructure to make sure that the movement work continued past your time on campus.
Yeah, so it sounds like continuity is a big one there. And that's a conversation I've had in my own state and also in meetings with the USSA. So I guess just a quick follow-up, what tools really worked for the UCSA in terms of making sure continuity was there over time?
I mean, UCSA in particular, when I was there, was well staffed. I believe we had 9 staff members that were funded by student fees, which were self-assessed at the campus level, and it was independent of the administration, which allowed us autonomy to make decisions. We had an executive director that helped to run operations on the day-to-day, but me as president and the board played a pretty important part in setting out the direction. You had summer Congress, right, that got people together to had the hard conversations to debate, and everyone would leave feeling more invested with what the direction was, the organization. And then we'd have a legislative conference to help put some of that stuff to action. And the staff was really important because they kind of held together the campaigns, got us involved, helped provide guidance at such an early age. Like, when you're on campus, it was just really critical to have a backstop to talk. And I think like USSA was the same way. We had, I think, during my time, we had upwards of 13 staff that were spread out nationally. And I remember, I think Matt, actually, you and some of your friends we ended up getting, like Jack, I think, as well, getting hired on, right? And so the ability to have staff was really important. But a lot of that, I think, was due to our ability to self-finance these organizations. And so in a lot of ways, using student fees as a mechanism to build power and build infrastructure was really important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we'll see. Actually, I think it takes me to my next question, which is for NECA. But I think, and actually, I'll just go into that next question ahead because it touches directly on that above, what's been happening with statewide, back in the day versus now, and really, what steps have certain states take to kind of, cut our feet out from under us when it comes to funding our own operations. So thank you, Victor, very much. That was very insightful. So NECA, over the past 2 decades, the image and exercise of student power has evolved significantly. Campuses are increasingly policing student protests and pushing student governments to act more as advisory bodies as actual agents of their own advocacy. We saw this in Wisconsin with the unique situation of the United Council and the state statute. Why do you think there is a national shift towards this? And how do we train students to resist the belief that they should be passive about their own power?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think it's also timely, right? I mean, I think if you think about sort of I think we can all probably in our minds think about one aspect of like global cultural shift that has happened and maybe would not have happened without like student movement work, and particularly the work of young people at the heart of it. And I think it's like when we just think about like the way the world moves, right? It's often a younger generation pushing back on the things that are no longer working about the cultural practices we all sort of adopt or maybe grow accustomed to. Some of us never do, but like sort of across the board. And I feel like on college campuses in particular, there's something really profound. I think it's one of you can push back if you want. I think it's one of maybe the last, I don't know, environments, ecosystems, spaces that's like situate, like it's poised for change work to happen. It's incredibly resourced, right? Even on like the 2-year or the 4-year scale, there are resources that are often not available to folks who are in the communities that might be arriving at those college campuses. And then on top of that, you kind of built in relationships. Whether those are strong or could be made stronger is to be debated, but there's a built-in community and ones that often form. If you're thinking like an organizer, you got to go where the people are. And the college campus is most often where you're going to find the space, the resources to actually make the concrete change you want. So I feel like it's one of the last frontiers for change work that has sort of this built-in like mechanism. And so I think that's really important. I think it's imperative that students continue to fight. And I think we saw this, right? Even in the face of a genocide, people putting their bodies on the line in the face of, we go back to the 60s, in the face of, state troopers and others, violent actors coming to murder Black students on college campuses. We see this at Kent State. We go down the list, we see when students rise up, right? It's when, the most vile things about this world make themselves manifest, students stand up. And I think that that is something to be protected, but I also think it's something we have to educate ourselves around. And I think we need to know our own history, right? Like when you go to college, when you go off to college, a lot of times, like, I don't know about y'all, parents sent me off with some war stories of theirs when some of them were kind of terrifying. My parents were like, this is what you should expect as you show up in these identities, right? They gave me the talk. But no one really gave me the schooling on what I was walking into in terms of my power, right? No one told me like, oh, you're going to UW-Madison, which since the 60s has been known as a protest campus and a space where you actually might find community and people like-minded who want to continue to push the button and fight for change. So there was, I think there's it's important to make sure that we understand our history. And I agree with what Victor said around power. I think power is relational, just as a definition. And and if we all believe that, which I strongly believe that, but if we believe that, then you have to start to then unpack what that looks like day to day. And I think if you're trying, if we're going to train students to sort of resist this, I don't know, this preposterous notion that they don't have power, they don't have a role in change-making work. I think we have to train them on what power actually means. And I think it starts with learning how it's like a revelation process, right? I think you have to learn, one, what power is and what it means to you. And all of a sudden, and I think that's done through experience, like experiential learning. You say, oh, that's why my food costs this much. Oh, okay. I think there's probably someone making a decision about that. Oh, that's why housing's so inaccessible. Oh, okay. Oh, that's why my curriculum's limited this way. You start to see the experience and you say, oh, I might be able to do something about that. And you're like, yeah, because there are people in rooms who make decisions about what's happening on a policy scale that then have long-term impact, right? And then begins the hard work of thinking about, so how can I actually build up the amount of resources it's going to take to shift the power in that relationship, to make them care more about what I want than what they want. And that's where we start to get to the heart of organizing, right? So I think it's a lot about education, educating people around power.
That's great. I think that does touch on some stuff that we heard earlier with the introductions and really about how accessible this work can be and really where it falls on us as younger student leaders who are still at our campuses to not only work for the current but also work for the future. Set ourselves up to set our successors up to continue to do the work that we're doing and be able to do it better. But I will ask a quick follow-up, and that's specifically with in Wisconsin at the time there was a state statute protecting the United Council and protecting the students' ability to represent themselves and advocate for themselves. What was your, if you were there at the time, what was your experience with that, with the possibility of your structure no longer being protected by the state, and how did students react to that, and if you're aware, how do students operate in Wisconsin now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I still remember the statute 36095. I think there's several people in United Council's history probably got it tatted somewhere on their bodies. We used to say that. It was like a mantra. We would meet like, all right, above all else, we got 36095, right? And people pull out the state statute and start reading it, right? Again, this is my point around study, but what that statute did was not just allow for a strong statewide student association. United Council was founded in 1960 at UW. Stevens Point is one of the oldest, I think the oldest statewide student association at the time. And it had sort of, what the statute allowed for was that students could organize themselves how they saw fit. So this is student government, of course, but it also meant other areas of governance. And it gave us the right to have a say in how the institution was governed. And so what that did was, and sort of through case law, like a lot of litigation actually happened around the state statute, but essentially what it meant was students had the right to decide how the public institution was going to run. And it was based on the spirit of why we would have a UW system in the first place. And it actually was replicated across the country. This idea that students could, if we participated in those decision-making, like those spaces where people are making choices about your lived experience, if students were there, the idea was that we could co-govern. But what has happened with that statute, and subsequently, I think with the movement, we can talk about the correlation a little later, but what happened with that statute and the movement has been a watering down, right? Of like, oh, didn't you know students' place is this? And more students are like, oh yeah, you're right. Whereas like when I was on campus, it was like, nah, peep the statute. You know, we had some education about our power, and we also understood a little bit about what it meant to actually exercise it, right? It's not just to have it. It's like, I want to use it to improve lived experience in this way. And right around the end of my time as an executive director of United Council, the statute was attacked, and so was our funding mechanism for the Statewide Student Association. And for me, that was actually a really important learning lesson. Like it was a learning for me, because we had built a lot of power over decades to try to win these huge wins at the statewide level. Wisconsin Dream, I mean, we could list so many really big wins. And then we found ourselves completely dependent on a resource that we hadn't really spent the time building relationship around. So when people came to take it, right, because they saw our power, we didn't have any like mechanism to protect it. And so I think that, you know, was part of the downfall of a lot of statewide student associations, actually, where people weren't clear on their power, sure, but they weren't clear on like, what's the relationship? What's the relationship to the communities I'm representing that's actually going to empower the longevity of this organization? And I think just, if I'm being honest, I think at United Council, we had done a lot of work to build relationship, but we hadn't done enough to sort of outweigh the impact of, you know, a Scott Walker budget slash which completely, you know, it gutted the mechanism by which we would fund our student association, and also how, you know, we even fund organization like USSA, right? So it had this huge impact. And you know, I also think there are ways that we can kind of go back through history and think about different ways we can fight. But I think it gives us a really great clue as to how to do things differently, right, in the future as we rebuild. So there's a lot of lessons. I'm happy to share more. But yeah, thanks for letting me share on those topics.
Of course, thank you. I was very excited to hear about what happened in Wisconsin, because in Washington right now, you know, we're looking at trying to legislate and give us more abilities when it comes to being able to like either fund our student governments, or really just that we have more protections and rights. And that does just go for students in general, but also, you know, what do our 2-year students look like compared to our 4-year students? And there's a giant discrepancy there, which you know, we're trying to work on right now at the WSA. But we really appreciate that insight. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Matt. So building on, and we've heard a lot this call regarding statewide student associations, which really is the point, but also, you know, how are they funded? You know, what were they? But I think an important thing to learn about is you know, like how do you build one? And our next panelist, Matt, actually has that experience in New Jersey. So I'm going to go on, you know, building on what Victor mentioned about the importance of statewide student associations. Could you share some key insights and lessons from establishing the New Jersey Student Association? Specifically, you know, we often struggle with engaging and retaining members. How did you manage this while starting something new, and why was it important for New Jersey to be a part of the USSA?
Cool. So there's the one thing I want to say on the outset is like part of my sort of history with a lot of this is that I was a part of this sort of like, you know, part of the kind of campus radicals. We wanted to build power to build a more democratic campus. And so then we built a cross-campus coalition. And then, you know, we were with that cross-campus coalition, we were able to take over the student government. And then now that we had the like student government, we wanted to connect with folks nationally. And the stuff that I'm about to sort of talk about, like we actually kind of did the same thing at each stage, obviously at different scales and in different ways. So I think some of this stuff that I'm about to talk about is like pretty universal. Um, so the first thing that I want to say that in terms of like building it, and I think NECA said it best, like, relationships are like super important. And we were very intentional about how we wanted to build relationships, both with people we knew on campus, and people we were trying to build with across the state. The first and biggest and most important thing we did was that, like, we showed up when I was building the New Jersey United Students. We traveled around the state, and I would hop in my minivan. Thankfully, Jersey's not so big, but we would go travel up and down to meet with other leaders, and just other students from all over. And I really can't stress enough, just like, showing up uh, gets you a lot of respect. Like a lot of people, especially when you talk about student government, like people want other folks that you're trying to organize to come to you. And that stuff happens and there's important times for it. But we went to everyone else and it gave us a lot of respect. We also just got to see like where folks were coming from better. And, so it just like gave us a bit more of like understanding of the folks we were trying to organize with. And people showed us a lot of respect. And it really just like helped us build strong relationships because we were with people in person. Um, and then, building on this like theme of like relationships, we were very big on sort of building personal relationships across our organizers and the folks that we were trying to organize. So we were really big on this concept at the time that we called the Pirate Caucus, which would be like the kind of hangout session after like a day of like an organizing meeting. And we were very big on like we would host a lot of potlucks and parties, and we would always invite people. And anytime that we had like a big statewide meeting, not everyone could always attend, but we always tried to make sure that there was a pretty strong social component, either built into the meeting itself, or we'd be like, hey, and we're gonna like hang out and have a good time like after the meeting. And that just really helped us build just like super solid relationships with a lot of people. And that was like again like building the relationships were like super critical. Um, I think in addition, um, in terms of like keeping new people, that you can never do too much political education. And we were always doing trainings and political education, and a lot of that wasn't like the social time. Like after a meeting, we'd invite people over to like hang out, and we would like kind of half just kind of BS and chat and do whatever, and then half would like, oh, here's why this part of the administration is undemocratic, and here's why we're trying to like change it. Um, so you can never do too much recruiting, and it's just a fact of the matter that was just student organizing. Like every year, you're going to lose all your best organizers. They're either going to graduate, they're going to step away from like school. So you can just really never, ever, ever do enough recruitment. And you always have to be doing it. And everyone needs to be like, recruiting is probably like the second most important thing any of y'all could be doing. And just doing that leadership development and then doing that training. But lastly, I'm going to just like sort of show something real quick. I'm going to share my screen about, also why it's like important to be a part of these networks. So this is like from a newspaper. Now it's, this is over 10 years old. But I was student body president at the time when I was a USSA board member. And, we would go to these conferences in DC called LegCon. And at this particular LegCon, we were doing this like student loan protest against, now they don't even exist anymore, which is like kind of wild. But at the time they were called Sally Mae. I think they evolved into something else. But we did this protest, this action at the Sally Mae headquarters. And so this is me as like student body president on the student newspaper. There's like 16,000 copies like printed about this. So like everyone on campus knew that I had that I had did this. And I think what's kind of important about this is like as of like the night before, I wasn't going to do it. I was like kind of worried. I'm like, oh, I'm like student body president. Like I had already stuck my neck out on a lot of things because I was like also the kind of campus radical student body president. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. Like, what are people going to like think? But sort of through talking with and being connected with folks, I think from around the country, like one of the things that really instilled in me is like, we have these positions, whether you're building a campus org, whether you're in student government, whether you're in the statewide student association, to get stuff done. You're only going to be there for a short period of time, and it's really important that you actually work towards the things you want to accomplish. And so, I was like, I actually should do this because it's important. It's going to be an important symbolic display on campus. And I'm like here as, as student organizer on student government, having wanted to run for student body president, because I wanted to accomplish things, and this was like a way to do it. So like a lot of times you can get into your own head, I think, about a lot of this stuff and come up with a lot of excuse about why not to do something. But it's really important to use what you have while you have an opportunity to do it.
It was I had read up on that action in the Sally Mae office, so it was actually nice to hear you talk about it because I believe we had, and this will bring me back, but we had Angus Johnson on the call. For those of you who are attending who don't know, Angus Johnson is really a student leadership and advocacy historian in the United States. Has done a bunch of great work, and that's something that he talked about was doing acts of like civil disobedience on their campus, especially if you were in a position to where you could do it. He discussed that on his own campus, and then his other thing, which really touched to your point about making it relational, is his whole thing was just make it fun. People want to join the winning team, and they also, I think a lot of us, especially me, I'll take the hit on it. I'm super obsessed with the policy side of this work, and at times, I really forget about the relational component, getting out there and meeting folks, and that's something as a young leader that I really learned that you really have to do, and that is the backbone of this work. For the sake of time, I don't think I'm going to be able to ask you a follow-up, but thank you so much for giving your insight there and really just hitting on the point of this work is accessible and we just have to, meet folks where they're at. We cannot expect folks to come to us, to get super involved. But thank you so much, Matt. And my final question for an individual speaker will be for Caesar, and this kind of ties us into we've talked a lot on this call about what do relationships look like between students and elected officials, students and also people in governance. And today we're likely to have an elected official from Arizona and Caesar here. So the relationship between students and decision makers is changing. What do you think autonomous student power and advocacy will look like in the coming years? And what types of relationships do students need to cultivate with elected officials now?
Yeah, no, I think it's very, very important to build relationships. When I was a college student at NAU, to talk about a little bit of history of ASA, when I became the executive director of ASA, we had lost our state funding, and I was handed over a box from an organization that existed for over 40 years, and all I had was a box, and it was just the legal documents of ASA, and it was wild. But I believed in the mission of ASA, and I believed in the work that I did as a student when I was there. And we had a little bit of money to be able to pay myself, and we had no board. And so when I took over ASA, I had to basically travel like Matt did to all these different college campuses and recruit students to be part of our board. And from there, after I got a board, I was able to start moving things out that we wanted to tackle in the state. And one of those things was in-state tuition for undocumented students. And I remember when we were doing that, one of the students that I recruited as a board member, her name's Lorena Austin, and she's also a state legislator with me serving today. And I remember we had built this really good coalition of students. We even got some research from college students at ASU on the legislation we wanted to be able to introduce for in-state tuition. And it was super cool. We met with the minority leader at the time. We gave her the legislation and we tried to input it in our state budget to try to pass. And those were, as college students, those were our early years of of actually doing something. We created a coalition, we had legislation, and we brought it down to the Capitol. And now 10 years later, both of us are state legislators, and we're really good friends. We're probably she's my best friend down there, and we continue to fight for in-state tuition. We continue to fight for higher education, and we are whenever there's anything that higher ed comes up with higher ed, we're the first to jump on it. But those are the very important relationships students start to build, not only within your state student association, but what you guys are doing today with USSA. It starts now in your college years, and it'll pay off later on as well because you have a strong coalition of people you know, and you never know where people will end up later that can help you too. One of the things that I always hear from lawmakers is when I have to talk to them personally behind doors and tell them, "Hey, don't support that legislation because of this." Students aren't going to support that, and students don't like that legislation. They'll tell me, "Well, the students never came to talk to me about it." And so it's super important that students are present there, constantly emailing, constantly showing up and meeting with and building those relationships with lawmakers. So you can literally just text, call, and show up and tell them, hey, students do not like this. Those are some of the frustrating conversations that I get to be part of being at the Capitol. And this last year, we saw some of these MAGA folks attack student fees. Even today, even though ASA doesn't collect student fees, but they kept making these false allegations that student governments were all liberal, which was just wild because they're not as political as they used to be, and they try really hard. The universities try really hard to make them unpolitical, at least in Arizona. And so I think those relationships are important. And I never thought I was going to run for office. I always helped other candidates run for office, and I helped them. And later on, I ended up running because we needed stronger candidates fighting for higher education. And even today, Arizona is really bad in terms of higher education advocacy. Um, but I think young people, you hold a very important role in our society. I think even when I go up to testify or I go up to make my speech, I look for the research the university students have made. And so it's funny because I think young people look at politicians for answers, and politicians are looking for young people for answers, because you're literally in a research facility, and so when you're able to build a research, we're able to use it on the floor, and I think that's power. That is power that young people need to recognize they have. A lot of the research that you guys are doing allows us to be able to back what we believe. Even though the other side doesn't believe in stats, we at least know that what we're fighting for is backed by facts. Um, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And also for the sake of time, I don't know if I'll be able to ask you a follow-up, but I kept thinking of some and then you just kept touching them. So I was like, all right, never mind. He's got it, he's ahead of it. But no, thank you. And you also, illustrated the point. I mean, it's been brought up a lot tonight about, how accessible this work can be, getting out there. It really is all relational. And the organizing component and making sure that we're actually, there and present in front of legislators is a big one. I think, the most successful states right now do have the capacity to do that. But, states such as Wisconsin, Arizona, who have had, sort of, not necessarily actually, no, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, who have had attacks against their ability to fund their organizations, have sort of felt that inability. But it's really important for students to, continue through. But thank you so much for actually, Caesar, go ahead. Actually, answer that if you
If I
answer that.
can, if I can add too, I think that's one of the things young people also we need to fight for more. We need to be direct that we want our state fundings going to our student associations. I think that's something historically we've shied away from, but as we continue to get defunded, we need to make our funding. Well, I know it's funny. People say we need to diversify funding, but when you've lost that funding, then we need to go back at fighting for more of that funding for our organizations to keep doing the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and that's something that I know we are working on in Washington right now because with the Oregon Student Association that has just unfortunately collapsed recently, I believe about 2 months ago, and a large part of that was funding structure, and at the WSA here in Washington, we've had conversations about, what are we going to look like? Because in terms of, funding structure across the country, we have one of the most volatile and also lowest operating budgets, but somehow we just find a way through. But yeah, looking for legislative fixes is going to be a really big thing we're working on. It's also important to note, like Washington is very clearly in one direction, but we still, struggle sometimes with getting things, for higher ed done, regardless of the side that it falls on. Specifically for student stuff, we actually have done some really incredible financial aid work. We have one of the most, equitable financial aid programs in the country in the Washington College Grant, and other stuff like that. But it's only because, students have organized that around that for years and we're able to get that through. So thank you for your insight, Caesar.
Yeah, if I can add another, like for
Yeah.
example, in Arizona, we have the Freedom Schools, which are Koch funded schools, and like every year they happen to find themselves money that basically go to, and so their schools that are in two of our universities, the Arizona State University and the University of Arizona, and every year they get a piece of the state budget to fund their departments, which literally go back to attacking the movements that we're fighting. So I think we need to be more strategic on opening up our, liberal institutions and what we believe in, and funding it through our state legislature.
So as an elected, how do you see the best path for students in order to do that? Especially in your state, there being, some rollbacks of where students, I was reading about today in the article that Tiffany wrote, if in what happened was students had, it was basically where their fees were being directed, they had more say in that. But how can students, I guess, not only in Arizona, but also across the country, really try to advocate for policies that are going to better support their efforts in the future?
Yeah, I think you meet with lawmakers that have direct power on the budget. You meet with the caucus chairs, and you tell them we want, you run a campaign on why you would like this funding and what you're going to do with it. But fund your university to make it go directly to your SSA, to be able to do the work that you're doing. And that's how the Koch brothers do it here in Arizona. And they've been able to really use those funds to target Latino communities and tell them that expand entrepreneurship and all this other stuff.
Great. Thank you for that. And that's really something that as we're building a nationwide organization again, funding was a component of why USSA collapsed. And really, not only how do we fix these issues, how do we, target these issues on a state level, but also as we try to, make our voices more known nationally, really where do we leverage that with what's currently going on in our states? Thank you so much for all that, Caesar. I really appreciate it. I actually am good on time. I got a message from Alicia. I thought I wasn't. But we're actually doing pretty good. So now I think we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Alicia, if you have any that came up.
Nothing from the chat, though I think I could pose two to the group of panelists that we have. One being just like, if folks remember nothing else from this conversation today, what should they have taken away from your comments and your remarks about student organizing, what student power is, and like how they can work to build and leverage that?
don't stop building relationships. Don't stop doing leadership development. Um, and just like keep your eyes on building power for you and your fellow students.
Yeah, I'd underscore what Matt just said, and I would just add, like, find yourself some good campaigns that that can spark some inspiration in folks. There's a lot that's going on right now, but find yourself some good campaigns to build the leadership, to build the relationships, right? To build the infrastructure and just invest the time.
I think also have faith as young people in yourselves. I'm in a state where our old people act more childish than our actual young people. And so I think we have a lot more qualified young people to be running this country and the state and all these organizations. And so really believe in the power you hold, and like everyone else said, build coalition with everyone, because that it's I think a lot of politics is a number game, so just build collective power.
Yeah, I would just add, I agree with all that's been said. I think people act when they feel urgency to act. Like, that's just the truth of human nature. And so part of an organizer's role in this like movement work is to either identify what's urgent to people or build real urgency about what's urgent to you. And I think that that has to happen on the student cycle, is what we used to call it. Like the student, it's like it's like you couldn't develop a campaign that's longer than a year, like 2 semesters. Like if you're talking like locally, right? There's long-term campaigns that we all like work towards it. Because it's like, oh, we're gonna lose people. So it's like half our campaign's capacity went to building the rest of our organization after we left. And the other half went to actually having a concrete win. And then we'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm graduating. And then new people would like come in, right? And so I think urgency, again, what Matt was sharing about recruitment and leadership development, training. I just think you can't do organizing without learning, like as a central component to what you're up to. And I think that's like, that was so central. It's like, all right, after every action, we're debriefing. Okay, after every meeting, how'd this go? What's working? Okay, I led this last meeting. Who's going to lead the next one? How'd that go? How did it feel to run the meeting, develop the agenda, think about, right? Like these micro practices that turn into macro, right? Those are things that I feel like, for me, I wish I had a mentor sooner in my walk in this work to support me in understanding the importance of doing that on purpose, as opposed to like reactionary, like, oh shoot, we're out of people, got to find some, right? Like that's never the greatest place to be. So I would definitely say that that's some folks take away.
Yeah, and something that I want to touch on here, something that Caesar mentioned was having faith, and then Nneka mentioned the importance of having mentors. What kind of engagement and advice can you both give students, and I guess for everybody, can give students who may otherwise be a little hesitant to act around campus or national issues for fear of retaliation or other consequences, from their institutions, from their local municipalities?
There's an interesting story you guys should look up, but there's a former lawmaker from Arizona. He was the first Latino elected lawmaker. His name's Alfredo Gutierrez. He's an OG, but he went to Arizona State University, and he was actually kicked out of the university for organizing some of the workers, some of the custodian workers at ASU. And he just got his diploma. I think it was this year or last year from ASU. And so I think it's a lot of times like the movement work doesn't end or doesn't stop, and we will continue to keep fighting the same fight. But we have dramatically moved forward, even though sometimes it does feel like it's gone backwards. Because I think student loan cancellation I remember being in those rooms fighting for that, and it was crazy to see that it actually, happened, and then the Supreme Court and all this other stuff. But I think that just means we're at another point, and so people still got their student loans canceled, but where is this generation now going to take that battle? And that's for you all to be in those meetings. Some of the things I tell the ASA folks is, you guys need to start with USSA, start building the policies that you want to see the next president tackle, and the next, elected officials tackle. But you all need to start that process and develop it. And there's a lot of us here that are willing to help you for free, because we had people do that for us. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, I just emphasize reach out. Like, I owe a lot to USSA, to UCSA. Like, every time I come across alums, I'm like, man, like if we didn't have that experience, like we were lucky. I mean, we're like light years ahead in some ways because of the experiences that we had. And even like hearing Matt's stories of like driving across the state. I mean, that's how it was. You were just figuring it out, just doing things. And so I would just say, like, don't be afraid, just do it. Right. And I think that, as you go ahead and do it, you'll understand, the risks as they become, larger and larger. But I think ultimately, like, focus on building the relationships, on doing the thing. Don't overthink it. I think there are a lot of relationships to be built. And then I think to the question that Francisco posed, like on there, I mean, there are always going to be students that aren't going to want to get involved. And that's just because folks are either disempowered or they're tired. And so that's why I think I go back to, like, the question of a campaign and whether or not you can identify people who have a connection via their self-interest on a campaign and want to get involved. Because if someone's not involved now, that's not a no, that's just a maybe later, right? If more people will get involved. And so I think it really comes down to the issue and, what you're working on and how you can get folks involved, whether it's the workers on campus, whether it's student fees, whether it's your bus system on campus is whack or something, right? Like there's got to be an issue that'll bring certain parts of the campus community out to get involved.
Yeah, like I just to sort of take on there real quick, like my life was essentially changed. Like my life was on one trajectory, and then after a meeting I was at one time, like one of the student organizers on campus, like asked me to do a one-on-one, and like my whole life changed because of that. Like he came up to me after a meeting and I was like, hey, I noticed you were saying some good stuff at the meeting, like we should talk. And then like followed up with me and then like invited me to like a Halloween party. And like literally like my whole life is different if like that conversation like doesn't happen. So it's just really important just to like put yourself out there. And there's like people where I can say that too, where like it's important to put yourself out there and go up and talk and ask the people, but to also like there are people that I talk to just like by like tabling or canvassing or just kind of putting ourselves out there who we were able to, bring into organizing. And it's one of the special things about being on campus is that kind of stuff can happen.
Yeah, and
Okay, go ahead.
no, you're so good. We're going on time, so feel free to add something.
Yeah, no, I think there's two quotes that guide me in this particular question, which is well, just to acknowledge the state of the world is not where I want it to be, nowhere near. And I think after Tuesday, many things became even more sort of alarmingly overt in terms of like how this country wants to, where this country is declaring, the majority of it is declaring they stand on values, right? I'm not talking necessarily politics here, but like where people's values are. And for me, I think two things come to mind. One, there's something really important that you have to consider when you're afraid, which is if you cave into fear or if you sit in it, lean in it, what's the state of the world going to be depending on what choice you make? And oftentimes, like there's this quote, Jesse Wilderman, and he's part of a community I do some trainings in, said, "Don't let your hesitation hold someone else back from their revolution." And I think what he meant by that was like, even though times can be hard, you might feel like, oh, I don't know, like, is this gonna risk arrest? Is this gonna get me kicked out of school? Is this gonna make things 10 times harder? It's like, I remember like riding my little bicycle on campus with my megaphone strapped to my back, like on the way to the protest, and someone was like, I saw you. And so I came. And then they began to get involved, and they brought in other people, and they brought in other people. And so there's something about like sparking change. But I also think for me, my mentors I've been graced with great mentors. They also brought up this idea of self-care. And I feel like when I was in the student movement, that was not prioritized often. It was like, all right, welcome to United Council. You're a field organizer. We're going to pay you 20 something $1,000, and we're going to expect about 80 hours of work from you. Like, that's like what it was. Like, I just signed up for that. And I was like, so on fire. I was like, got on my Nissan Sentra and drove around the whole state of Wisconsin. But, you know, our good sis Audre Lorde, right, talks about care for self. And that, like, that's self-preservation in the midst of like political warfare. That's what that is. And so I want to just encourage that, also in the face of like wanting to make big change, sometimes it's also like, how do I make sure that I like have a balance in my life that allows me to sustain in this work? And I don't want us to lose sight of that. And oftentimes the two meet when we build real relationships, deep relationships. Like, I'll sometimes call up Tiffany and we won't even talk about organizing, you know? This is like, I'm caring for myself. You're my actual sister in this movement, but in life too, right? And I encourage that type of mentorship and partnership with each other, because that's what sustains the movement, right?
Yeah, and that's incredibly insightful, and it's something, mentioned about wearing all these hats, and sometimes those hats can get really heavy. And I have midterms, I have exams, I have life, family, friends, and like that can absolutely be, especially recently, this quarter has been a whirlwind. And it's really, I've had to take times where, like, okay, like, what do I need to focus on now? What's like, the world is not going to end if I don't send that email. Let's take a minute, let's breathe. It's also knowing that, like, if you put yourself in a position to where, you can literally no longer do the work because you just haven't decided to help yourself, you can no longer help others. And that's a really big thing for us, especially when we're in this position, to rebuild this organization, that we got to make sure that, we're strong first and we're ready first, so that we can, help others get there. And another thing I wanted to touch on, just because it's funny, it was in this call and also our last call with Angus Johnson, but Caesar, Matt, and Angus all mentioned how all it took for them to really get involved and their life is on a different trajectory, was really just one interaction. Someone approached you or you approached them, you had a conversation, and now you're sitting in a completely different, space than you would have otherwise. Angus talked about, meeting his wife and then eventually having kids just because he got into student government. That's to me, that's incredible. And I've also seen that even in my short few years, before I got into student government, I was a pre-med major. I loved it. I still do. But now I moved, after the policy work to, maybe go towards the direction of pre-law. So I think that's something that a lot of us can take away from the call, especially combining that with what we've heard tonight about, trying to meet people where they're at. Is you could not only can you change really your state and in the country in terms of higher ed work, because we really can and we have, you can also change lives of those around you. You can introduce them to something that they maybe didn't even think of beforehand, and can really put people on a path that'll set them, to either become an elected official in Arizona, or to do work in LA or Houston, or all over the country. Like you can really change people's lives. And not only with policy, but also with personal interaction. So I believe we are gonna go ahead and go into our closeoff here. I want to thank, and we're gonna do a few things. So I don't want no one leave yet. We're gonna do a few things here, but really, and I'll lead in the call to action here. But for those of you who are on the call for the first time and haven't really interacted with the USSA, we recently adopted a formal plan to bring back the organization. And with that, we plan to convene in DC in spring of next year and to, adopt a new constitution, bylaws, elect new leadership, and really set the path forth, to really figure out where students want to go with this and to continue to lead on a national level. I encourage you to get involved with this work, and I'm going to get into committees things in a second. But the last time students were in this position, 1946. The last time students were in a position to build national student power at this scale was 80 years ago. I did that math correctly, like 78 years ago. That's incredible. Like everyone on this call and the people that you know would be interested in this work can help build something that we have not had to do in almost a century. And like I'm excited about that, and I want others to be excited about that because it not only is a huge responsibility, it's a huge opportunity. We can do things on this call, on future calls, when we get to DC in spring, in years from now, that will affect students. It'll build relationships. And it can really just get this work done, and it needs to get done. Students haven't had a voice at the federal level, and I almost didn't do that math right in 8 years. And we have to get back there, especially where things are now. And the next part I'll talk about, I'm going to have Alicia put the document in the chat, is in order to succeed on this path to restart the organization, we are currently creating committees, of which there are three, and I'll briefly talk about each of them. So we have an outreach committee, which will focus on social media, retaining members, reaching out to new schools, and doing all that, reaching out to statewide. We then have a policy committee, which is going to research, federal policies that we should take a stance on even early on in the organization, and really to look at, what's going on in the higher education space on a national level. And then the operations committee, my personal favorite, working on, getting some governing documents for the organization going, a constitution and a bylaws, and then also working to, plan the convening for spring in DC, because, remember, the organization is not fully back yet, and that's a really important role. Alicia should be dropping the document in the chat, and there should be a link to, at the very bottom, there should be a link to joining a committee. I I cannot stress this enough. I highly encourage you to sign up to join a committee and also to tell others too. There are about 30-ish to 40-ish people on this call right now. It's a cascading effect, and Colin mentioned this in the chat. Each of us are individuals. We can touch at least 5 to 10 people outside of that. That cascades from 30 to 150 people. That's organizing and that's building power. I strongly encourage you to get involved, because this is where the real work is going to lie. We need a strong social media presence. We need to be able to, take decisions on federal issues, and we need to, have a structure in general. We need to learn from what went wrong in the past, and to, help build a structure that hopefully won't suffer from those same issues. But seriously, and again, a big theme throughout this entire night is how accessible this work is. Right now, you have an opportunity to get involved here. And I'm sure each of us know people outside of this that were like, I'm sure they'd like to, or maybe not. And maybe you just introduce it to them. We all have influence on our campuses. We all know people. Each of you know at least one person. I'm confident of that because you have parents, you have family members. You must at least know one person. Just get involved with the students around you, because this work, it's going to start here, and it's going to cascade forth, and we really do have a big opportunity to make an impact. Speaking of socials, Alicia, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's at US Student Association on Instagram. So our panel was uploaded there. I believe, as we get closer to DC, more info will be put there. Our meeting minutes, our times, our meeting links will all be put there. That's the best way to get involved with the organization going forward, and where you can get constant updates. Just DM that account and we can get you set up in the future. Now, the last thing we're going to end with is a group photo. So if everyone can jump on camera, get ready to smile, do all that fun stuff, put us in gallery mode. Alicia, I'm assuming that you're going to do this from your end.
Got it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna give y'all a countdown just so you know where I'm at. On the count of 3, I'm gonna end up snapping these photos. Bonnets are okay. Do-rags are okay. All of the things, however you are in this space at this present moment, is 100% okay with us. And we'd love to see y'all faces. Thank y'all for showing out and joining us this evening. All right. Okay, so like that countdown as promised. 1, a good 2, because I'm seeing some movement. 3. And then I'm gonna grab one more just in case, like that was a little raggedy. So I'll get plus that later. All right. And we are good to go. Thank y'all.
All right, and we will for sure email some additional information as we close out. But thank you all so much, and have a great night. And please get involved if you'd like to. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Night.
Take care, y'all.